Let me pull up this story because I think regular people are waking up. The narrative is breaking. From Timcast.com, Pennsylvania Republicans increase voter registration, shrinking gap in predominantly Democrat state. For every Republican voter who has registered as a Democrat, 4 former Democrats have become Republicans.
Wow.
4 times as many, switching the other direction. I always give a shout out to Scott Pressler. Are you familiar with Scott Pressler?
Not really.
The persistence on Twitter. This guy's been going out and registering people to vote.
Yes.
All over the place. He was cleaning up cities. Now this is a guy who he does the work. And partly due to his work, and truth be told, there's many other activists who are working towards voter registration as well. We're now starting to see the tides shift. I don't think the Republican Party will be the salvation of anybody unless people vote in the primaries. Mm-hmm. And they do kind of what we're seeing up in New Hampshire with the Free State Project. You see that? Mm-hmm. Getting a bunch of, populist, America First, libertarian-minded people to run. And then we're going to see some positive changes. But this is massive. And again, it's indicative of people saying we've had enough. The economy's in the gutter. We don't like Joe Biden. It's been a year, and already we're seeing this massive shift. And it's also people snapping out of the media narrative. I want to show you one thing before we all start diving into this. Take a look at this from the generic congressional vote 2022. Republicans have a lead of 3.6 points. So we're still a bit out. Take a look at 2020. The Democrats had the lead in the generic congressional polling aggregate the entire time, ending with a 6.8 lead. And Republicans still made powerful gains, especially in Democrat strongholds. Yeah. What are we going to see in November? It's going to be massive.
This November is going to be a wipeout, I think, and unless the only thing that could stop it, and it's not going to happen, is Joe Biden basically saying, I think the environment matters, but the new Green Deal is finished. If he actually turns against the left, because remember, like Obama, Biden ran as a centrist. That was the whole point of Joe Biden. And one thing people forget about Obama, he was a very popular guy, obviously a very charismatic and kind of likable guy, and people liked him. Every Democrat except him was voted out of office during his term of office. Right? There was like two Democrats still working. The rest of them were at a malt shop somewhere. So people do not like these programs.
But you saw the State of the Union with Biden, right?
Yeah.
It was sort of we're still hoping to do things of the union.
Yes.
Because he never really mentioned it. What's the State of the Union?
Come on.
Campaign speech.
But
yeah,
I mean,
it was a campaign speech.
He talks about border security. He says, "I'm a capitalist." He was just stealing.
He said fund the police.
That's right.
Fund the
yes,
police,
he did. He said we need to secure the border.
He's
He's
trying to play
cure
both sides.
cancer too.
So we're going to
cure cancer.
build microchips in the field of dreams, man.
And how stupid does he think? Well, I guess we.
Dumb enough to elect him.
It answers itself.
People switching parties is proof that people are not stupid. They're waking up and they realize Joe Biden is spitting in their faces with everything he's doing.
I agree, and I don't even know, is Joe Biden running the country? I mean, I have no idea. But whoever is, I mean, really, the AOC, Bernie Sanders wing of the party is completely in control. They believe, as AOC just said on the air, she said we've got to be more left wing because
Let
them. That's the way I feel too. Yeah, go for it.
I think it's the bankers that are controlling the country. I saw an Andrew Jackson quote from 1830 where he called the bankers a den of vipers, and then they tried to kill him. Somebody shot him. He broke up the central bank.
I agree to a certain degree, right? Obviously, the Federal Reserve, we all have our problems with. But I think what happened to the Democrats is they saw AOC and the rise of the progressives, and they thought we can wield this power. But little did they realize it was like the One Ring, and they would not be able to.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Biden has always followed the drift of his party. During Clinton, he was kind of conservative. I mean, he wrote the anti-crime bill that everybody's complaining about. So he always has followed the drift of his party. They call it leading from behind. I mean, it's leading from your ass, basically. But I mean, he has always followed where the power in his party is. And right now, the energy, the power in his party is from on the left, but not the majority.
I mean, he follows the party so closely, like he literally steals their backstories when he talks about his life. Like, why am I the first Biden to not work in a coal mine, man?
First Biden.
Yeah.
Well, you do got to give Joe Biden credit for one thing. He's brought a few things to the White House that we've not seen any president bring before. And it's Batacalf care, next nulrescent, and Trinidad Shabbat.
I really appreciate the Trinidad Shabbat pressure that he placed on
game changer.
Putin. Game
that
changer.
He placed on Putin.
Trinidad Shabbat pressure, man.
I have to say, you guys do that really well. I can't imitate that. It's like
difficult.
It's like another
Honestly,
language.
Honestly, it's probably to your credit that you can't.
Next nulrescent. Batacalf care, those are easy. But Trunin in a Shabbat pressure. Trunin on a Shabbat pressure.
By the way, we Trunin and Shabbat pressure. We turned it into a song and made it a cartoon called Biden's Greatest Hits. You guys better go check that out.
Good.
Someone said it's Truinder dash Shabbat pressure.
Yeah.
And no, I do see how you might hear that, but I listened to that over and over again on a repeat, trying to transcribe what he said to figure it out. Trunin and a Shabbat pressure.
Yeah, the double in and a
Yeah, the Trunin and a Nish. Truin and a Nish. Shabbat pressure.
true international something under pressure. I think that's what he was attempting.
True
Very good.
international cooperation.
Like the Biden whisperer. That's
Yeah,
it.
well, we talked about it before. Can't
Yeah,
take
he
the
does
credit.
that little whisper. It's very bizarre.
You know what concerns me about him going with the flow is like that this weird kind of, I don't know how to describe it, this movement of like this communist ideologies that are kind of creeping. It seems like he's giving it to them, like he's just letting it happen because he feels like that's where the pressure's coming from. Is we got to do what the young people want, man. I don't know why, but it seems like he's just folding.
Somebody told him, or he told himself, that with a 50-50 split in Congress, in the Senate certainly, but really across the board, he was going to become FDR. And that's just not the way politics works. It's not the way American politics work. He does not have the votes to do the things that he wanted to do, and people didn't want them done. Joe Manchin, it's funny, Joe Manchin actually represents a more popular point of view than AOC does. I mean, if you just counted people who agreed, checked off what Manchin believes in, they would follow him.
But AOC is more popular because she's pretty.
She's popular to the press. And she's popular. Remember, she's in a safe
she knows
district.
how to get
She's
attention.
in a safe district.
I really get turned off by how people follow beautiful people. It's really disgusting.
Welcome to life, bro.
People don't want.
It's so dangerous. We got to
Ian.
fix that as a species.
So are you saying you hate my fans?
Well, I'm not saying you're beautiful, if that's what you're asking. Your fans are the beautiful.
I was gonna do a similar joke, but I was gonna say, Ian, would you give up all your followers then?
I was going to say it too, but I was like, you know what? It would be a bad look to compliment Ian. I'll
We're all
compliment
going to
myself.
die eventually.
But you see the story that
popularity
AOC,
contest,
the
I
FEC
hear you,
says
though.
that
I hear
they
you.
failed to report $1 million in expenses. That it seems that they were funneling money, dark money, between two different organizations run by Saket Chakrabarti.
Yeah, it sounds like a racist, sexist thing to say.
Yeah,
Continue.
this is to me the fascinating thing, and I don't hear anybody talking about this. All these socialists are supported by the rich, and I wonder, does AOC ever wake up in the middle of the night and think, why are the biggest corporations on earth agreeing with me? I'm a socialist. I mean to take their property away. Why are they agreeing with me? Or does she know that socialism always serves the rich and the powerful?
She seemed to change about a year and a half ago. Something snapped in her brain, and now she believes this weird. She's like on board with that thing. It feels like it. Something changed in her rhetoric.
Power.
Do you guys ever see the episode of Simpsons where someone asks Homer to listen, and he says, "You have my undivided attention," and then it zooms into his brain, and it's playing.
The monkey with the symbols, right?
No,
it's the old cartoon with the cow
and it's a
playing.
turtle's banging on his chest like. I kind of imagine that when I see her like doing interviews or talking, because she said things and that are so absurd. You'd think she doesn't have access to a dictionary or Google.
Yeah.
Like when she talked about capitalism, she was like, "No one's a capitalist because they're not rich." It's like those things don't connect. What are you talking about?
You know what?
Google that? Did you Google that before you said it?
Another one of her greatest hits is when she was complaining about the fact that people say that universal health care is going to cost a lot of money, and she said, well, why don't people talk about all the money we're going to save when we don't have to pay for as many funerals? Yeah. It's like, do you think people stop dying if we have universal
they
health
eat
care?
more sugar because you keep them alive
Remember
longer.
Amazon? What
She said she saved money
and it
for
was
her
like-
district because Amazon didn't move there.
They're like,
Yes.
why are they giving money to Amazon? They're not. They're giving them a discount on the taxes they would pay. Like, so the $30 billion the city would get.
And the jobs.
Right. So it's like Amazon would pay $27 billion instead of $30 billion because they're getting a $3 billion discount. And she's like, but why are we giving them $3 billion?
But here's the thing.
So they don't go to national.
We're not. They're paying us.
But
Didn't
that's
she study
actually
economics?
and I'm going to be honest, that's not
Opportunity
just
cost
that's
is what
not
it's
is for as many problems as there are with AOC's thinking, socialism being one of them. That's not a unique flaw with their thinking. That's just part of the socialist ethos. This business is only here exploiting and taking advantage of our workers. The only way we benefit from them being there is by taking their money involuntarily. So from their perspective, they really did lose money on that, as absurd as that sounds.
But they were either way going to take money from Amazon, just a little bit less.
But
They don't see it that way because Amazon was going to come there and exploit their workers.
Yeah.
Socialists never ask themselves where the money comes from.
Yeah.
I love going on these posts I'll see on Facebook where it's like they say landlord isn't a real job, or they say wage labor is theft, And so I asked a few of these socialists some questions. I was like, what if the people who rent my property are paying less than the cost of maintaining and upkeeping the property? Is that theft? And they're like, that makes no sense. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, sometimes people rent out a property and it will cost more than the amount they're paying in rent. So who's being robbed now?
Yeah.
There's like no good answer. I said, what if I'm paying the employee more money than they generate for the company? Is that theft? And they're like, that's not possible. I'm like, yeah, it's called investment. Like, you can invest in a project that's making no money, but you're hoping to make money in the long term. So you're giving your money to somebody who's making no money for you in the hopes they eventually will. And then you'll get paid back.
Right.
They're like, well, then you're an idiot. That's literally what I was told on Facebook.
Well, that's like when women demand equal pay for the same sport, and you go like, nobody's watching the sport, nobody's watching women's sports. It's just like they will now that men are playing them, but still, and you get paid the money that you bring in.
I actually knew the people who got at the X Games. They used to pay women 10% of what the men got paid. And so this is the story as it was told to me, because I actually ended up going to the X Games as like an advisor, liaison or whatever with one of these organizations. So a good friend of mine was one of the top female skateboarding pros for a while. And what I was told by these people, at the X Games, they would give, I think it was like $30,000 to the first place male winner. And the first place female winner would get $3,000. And when this group of parents and organizers went to Disney, to ESPN or whatever, whoever runs it, said, you're paying women 10%, like that's not fair. And they said, look at the stands. How many people are there watching? You guys, you don't sell any tickets. We can't pay you money we don't have. Well, after some clever negotiating and some good PR tactics, eventually they agreed, we're going to pay the same. What the argument was from the organizers is, we have the best female skateboarders in the world. If you can't sell tickets, you have a marketing problem. And so they said, you're going to pay the same you're going to pay. And so eventually they agreed. There's a really interesting backstory behind it. I don't know if it's public, so I'll refrain. But that was their mentality. I think there's a decent point there, to be honest.
Well, no. If there is a point there.
If you're going to invest in a show, and you're saying the going rate for the top athletes in a division is X, you're investing hoping that you can figure out how to monetize it. If you want top athletes and you can't figure out how to sell those top athletes, then I'd argue get rid of the division outright instead of just being like.
Well, that certainly would have been one answer, but I don't understand. I mean, it may be there's just less demand.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it's a problem with marketing, why don't these female skateboarders get together, rent a stadium, hire a competent marketer, and make just as much money as the men?
Well, that would require tens of millions of dollars in investment they didn't have.
Potentially, but they could start smaller and they'd still be generating more income than this business that is just failing to market them
When
properly.
you come to performance-based jobs, you got to pay people based on their performance. And if the girls can't jump as high, sorry, you're not performing as well.
But look at women's tennis. Women's tennis makes a ton of money.
But that's because women's tennis is almost a different game. I love tennis, and women's tennis is almost a different game, and in some ways a better game because it's slower and you can see it more.
Oh, that's a good point.
So it brings and they wear those cute little dresses. So I mean, it brings people in. No,
but that's structure of marketing, right?
Everything. I never liked the Williams sisters, not because any personal animus, but they were so strong that they kind of overwhelmed people. Because I always liked the slower women's game because it's just more strategic and more interesting. The rallies last longer. It's just more fun. So it makes money.
Women's volleyball too. I've always
this is interesting. That. I don't know. So the guy who actually led the charge for women's tennis in the 80s is the same guy who was leading the same charge for women's skateboarding. So I think there's still an agreement there. I think perhaps they need to create a different structure and stop trying to just replicate men's with women and maybe make something different.
Well, I'm all for that. I think that is one of the big mistakes of feminism is they're always trying to make the women men, even in how they live their lives. Like women start their careers early because of the feminists say their careers are important. I think why not have the babies early and then have your career afterwards? It makes a lot more sense. So just because men do it one way doesn't mean women have to do it the same way.
Well, I'll tell you, man, there's this woman I know. She had a kid when she was in her mid-20s. So this is what she told me. Her and this guy were both doing the same kind of work. They were working in like media production. She ends up having a kid and took off only a little bit of time to, take maternity time off and then raise the kid. but it disproportionately held her back because there's an exponential gain to working nonstop when you're young. And so, she was pointing out that she's now in her 30s and she's half the distance of the guy who never took any time off.
Sure.
But that said, I said to that, I'm like, I don't know if there's any solution to that because women literally have babies and men don't.
Yes, and also maybe she got something else that men didn't have, and maybe she had a life that she liked better.
She got to have a kid and spend time with her kid, and that other guy didn't.
It's a nice thing.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.